So now I think we are ready to start. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to the ELT125 Phonetics and Phonology. Today is Thursday, the 10th, I think. Yes, December the 10th. And we are going to start this session by playing a game. And this game is about nationalities. And it's called Do You Know Their Nationalities? In this game, you are going to be presented a set of images of some celebrities, and you have to guess basically their nationalities, or if you know them, you have to say them. So this is the first, how many are we? 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, we are going to start anyways because this is just a game. And this is the first image of this person. He's a singer. And if you know the answer, please raise your hand or just unmute your mic. So he's a singer. He obviously speaks English. He sings in English. He has some very well-known songs, like for instance one that was playing a lot on the radios last summer called Señorita. That was a duet. Do you know what his name is? I can give you a hint. It starts with S. Oh, Gaspar said Shawn Mendes. You're correct. And do you know what is his nationality? By any chance, do you know that? He's from an English-speaking country, obviously. So the options are not many. Canadian, that's right. He is Canadian. Now, we have another male, and he is an actor. He's known for many characters. One of the most important ones was Thor, because he played Thor in the Avengers movies. Do you know his name or what his nationality is? Any clue? He has a brother, and both of them are known as like the tradition. I mean, not the traditional, but like the stereotypical males that go to this place that, I mean, in this city where they have a beach and they practice a lot of water sports. Well, I think all of them have a sea coast, but it's a country with a sea coast, and obviously it's an English-speaking country. Do you know which one maybe? It is no Canadian. I'm going to say that because it's just one per country.
Australia?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that again?
If I recall.
Which one? I'm sorry, I could not hear you. What was your answer?
Australian.
Australian. That's correct. He's from Australia and he's Australian. Now we have the next celebrity, and she is a singer. As a hint or as a clue, she's not Canadian and she's not Australian. But the flag of this country is very similar to the Australian flag. Two places are also close together. I mean, are close from each other.
New Zealand?
That's right. She's a New Zealander. She's from New Zealand, and her name is Ella, but she goes by her stage name, which is Lord. So yeah. This is the next celebrity. He is a chef, a well-known chef with 7 Michelin stars, and he is also I will say a TV host, but also he is sometimes part of the jury, and he has a lot of TV shows in the country from which he is from. Do you know who he is or what his nationality is?
He's Gordon Ramsay, British.
That's right. That's correct. He is British. He was born in Scotland, but then he moved to Stratford when he was young. So he is British. And this is our last celebrity. She is an actress. She is a singer. She's in a show that an episode came out this week, I think, or last week.
Zendaya.
That's right. And what is her nationality? Do you know her nationality?
I don't know.
I'm going to say this. It's not Canadian. It is not from Australia either, or New Zealand. Now we have only 2 options. Which one it is? Because it's from an English-speaking country. The answer is an English-speaking country. This country has the name of the continent in its name. So where is she from? What's her nationality? Yes, that's correct. She is from the United States. She is American. And that, as I already mentioned, that was the last celebrity. And as you could see, we are talking now about English-speaking countries. And it is because today's lesson, it's about dialects of English. Most specifically, the most common dialects of the English language. And after that, we are going to have our break. And after the break, we are going to practice some dialects, and we are going to work with connected speech, both in the dialects we have already mentioned. And today's objectives are that you're going to be able to identify the most common dialects of English in context, and you're going to be able to identify key elements of the most common English dialects. So first, and I know that you probably know this already, but before we start, we need to remember this information. And here, as you can see, you have a 3-group model in which we can classify English speakers. So we have English as an ENL, as a ESL, and as a EFL. So in the first one, it means English as a native language, and here we can find native speakers of English, or people whose first language, their mother tongue, is English. Then we have English as a ESL, and it means that they have English as their second language, and they are non-native speakers, but they learned English almost at the same time as their mother tongue, so they acquire the language as a second language. And then we have English as an EFL, and this means English as a foreign language, which is a category of non-native speakers who learned English in a country where English is not usually spoken. Like in the case of us, we study English as a foreign language because here none of our border countries or neighboring countries speak English. So we study English and learn English and acquire English as a foreign language. And with this in mind, we are now going to talk about Kajiru's motto that is called the 3 circles of English. And as you know, throughout the history and with the information of the previous module, English experts have tried to classify English speakers and also English speakers. And one of the most important and accurate models is the one proposed by Brad Kachiru in 1988. In this 3-circle model, that's called the 3-circle models of world Englishes, he states that they are 3 concentric circles of the language. And in each circle, we have different speakers that are classified and are set in these different categories. And the 3 different circles are the inner circle, this one, the outer circle, this one, and the expanding circle, which is this one, that it's the biggest one. So now we're going to go one by one, and this is the first one. Sebastian, can you help me with the information on the left corner, if I'm not mistaken? Left, right corner. Please.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
The inner circle refers to the traditional, historical, and social linguistic origins of English. Here, English is used as a first or native language, and its speakers are the ones in charge of providing the norms. These places are where the norms are created and from which they spread to the other circles.
Thank you very much. So as you already mentioned, in this circle, we can find countries that use English as a first or native language. And some of those countries, those countries are the United Kingdom. In America, we can find Canada and the United States. We can also find that's Australia and New Zealand. And sometimes we forget about this one, but it should also be present, which is Ireland. In this circle, there are about 400 million speakers, and if I'm not mistaken, 70% of those of that number are just from the United States. So the majority of English-speaking or native English-speaking people comes from the United States. Now we're going to move on to the outer circle. Omar, can you help me with the information of the outer circle, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
The other circle represent the places where they speak official non-native varieties of English because of their colonial history. The speakers of these places are the ones who challenge their norms and develop them and are mainly ESL.
Thank you very much. So we need to remember that in these places they speak their own varieties of English, and they usually speak English as an ESL. Therefore, that means as English as a second language. And here we can find some countries from Asia, which are India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Hong Kong, Singapore. Now we also can find some African countries like South Africa, Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria, Tanzania. And we can also find Jamaica and the Philippines. And now we are going to talk about the expanding circle. And Nicolás Duran, can you help me with the information of the expanding circle? Kelly Valdez?
Yes, Miss.
Thank you very much.
The expanding circle is made up by EFL speaker where English is not usually spoken. In this circle, the speaker have to follow the rule established by the inner circle and developed by the outer circle.
Thank you very much. So, as you already mentioned, here in this circle we can mainly find EFL speakers, where English is not usually spoken. And here is that we can have we follow the rules that the inner circle have established. That's because the inner circle is the one from where the language comes. So they create the rules. The outer circle develop some rules, or they create their own varieties, and we also follow some or of the components they have established. And here we can find some countries such as China, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, that's Indonesia, yes, Brazil, Russia, and Egypt. And according to this, what do you think, in which circle do you think Chile is placed?
In the expanding circle?
In the expanding circle? No, that's correct. We, as the other countries that are here present, in this circle, it is said that they are countries who have acknowledged the importance of English, and they have recognized the importance of English, but are countries that have not institutionalized English as an official language. So we have English as a second language, and therefore we are still in the expanding circle. We have not created our own variety of English yet to be part, for instance, of the outer circle. So yes, that's correct. We are in the expanding circle. Now, we are going to move on to this topic, which is the difference between accents and dialects. And it is because sometimes we get confused with these two concepts, and it's important to understand them. Now we are going to move on to the inner circle, and you have to remember that, as I already mentioned, these countries are the ones who have their own set of rules, and they every single one of them, they speak their own variety of English. So first, we're going to talk about dialects, and I am going to Gaspar, or I think your mic was not working right. Can you speak, Gaspar? Diego Troncoso, can you help me with this piece of information from, these 3 points?
Dialects. A dialect refers to a variety of the language. It includes the differences in grammar, morphology, vocabulary, syntax, and pronunciation among different versions of a language. Example: American English, British English.
If you want, I can read the example if you want.
Okay, please.
Thank you very much. So as you already mentioned, a dialect, it's a variety of a language. And there you, for instance, there you have two examples. For instance, in the US, you will say, would you like some tea? Would you like some tea? But in English, in British English, in the UK, they will say, fancy a cuppa, to refer to the same action, or those two sentences have the same meaning, but the first one is in American English and the second one is in British English, because they are two different dialects, two different varieties of a language. So even though both languages are English, the dialects are different. And with that in mind, now we're going to move to accents. And an accent, it's a part of a dialect. So that means that accents are part of what we already mentioned when we said that it was part of the differences in pronunciation. By saying differences in pronunciation, we are including accents inside the definition of dialects. So an accent is a part of the dialect, and it refers to the way people pronounce specific words and phrases of the same language differently from each other. And there's an example, American versus British accent. Accents, as we have at the bottom, are distinguished from each other by pronunciation alone, while dialects deal with vocabulary, pronunciation, and grammar. When we listen to someone speaking and we say, we can tell, and because of what we are listening to, we can tell, oh, he has an English accent or a Canadian accent. But when we have the written language, we can see, for instance, if they're using, when we read something, we cannot tell if they're using an accent in the written form. Therefore, when we read something, we can identify the dialect the speaker is using or certain person. To sum up, accents are it's a part of a dialect, and it is only and it refers only to the way a group of people pronounces some words, while dialects deal with vocabulary and grammar as well. So they are like the whole package, and and accents are just one more, it's another component of the whole umbrella that are dialects. One thing to mention is that it's important to remember that there's not a correct answer, a correct accent in English. All accents are valid, and if you do not speak with with a certain accent, it's okay. And if you do speak with a certain accent, it's also okay, because as English learners, our main goal is to be understood, and to do that, we do not need to have a specific accent. So I think that's something important for you to keep in mind. So don't get frustrated. If you want to work in an accent, to get an accent, you can do it. But if it doesn't work, or if you cannot speak with, how can I say this? If you cannot speak with a certain accent yet, it's also okay. You don't need to be frustrated by it or anything, because accents are not important as long as you are understood. So now we're going to move to the British dialects, and there are almost 40 different dialects in the UK only. So imagine how many dialects we have in the whole inner circle. Here you have a map, and here are some of the dialects. They are not all of them, but it can give you an idea of where certain dialects and maybe some accents are spoken in Britain. Yes, in Britain. And for instance, you have there Geordie in this part, right? Oh, sorry. You have Geordie accent. This accent, it's particularly for this zone, whereas in this one, I think, no, Welsh, where's Burmy? Burmy. Here we have the Birmingham accent, and this accent it's particularly of this zone, whereas we have, for instance, the London accent, which is from London, I mean the London dialect, which is from London, and we also, inside that one, we can find the Cockney dialect, that it's a very interesting one to analyze if you want to investigate, I mean, if you want to do some research about it. It is very interesting, especially because they have a type of slang that they don't say some words, some specific words, but they use words that rhyme, that are not that don't make sense, or they are not connected with the word they wanted to say in the first place. And I know this sounds weird and complicated, but for instance, instead of saying stairs, like, oh, go downstairs, like stairs, they say go down the apples and pears. Like, they name two fruits, different fruits, instead of saying stairs, and people understand that, and I find that fascinating. I don't know about you. So if you want to investigate about that one, I recommend you to go further into the Cockney accent, I mean dialect, which is one of the most known one. The Yorkshire, it's also very known, and some Scottish ones and Irish ones are also very well known. But now we're going to move to the British English. And first, we need to remember that here is where it all began. I mean, the English language that we know in the modern day was originated here. And it is interesting that we are taught, I mean, not taught, well, yes, in some way in schools, usually about received pronunciation only. And received pronunciation, or RP, is spoken natively by only about 3% of the British population. And that's a very low percentage of native population speaking these accents, but we are mostly introduced to it. I mean, English learners, when there are so many other accents which are most more used, but or they are more native speakers of those accents. Some general aspects we need to know about British accents in general is that they tend to drop the final R sound when it's at the end of a word, but when it's followed by a vowel, like in the case of the word moral, we do pronounce the R. And when it is at the beginning of a word, we also pronounce the R, like in the case of royal. And there are some dialects in, if I can go back, like in this part, in which they do pronounce, like in the west part of England, in which they do pronounce final R's at the end, but usually that it's not the case. And there's another scenario in which we do pronounce final R sounds, and it has to and it's because of a feature of connected speech. Do you remember which was the name of that feature? Do you remember? Okay. Bastian?
Linking.
Yeah, that's right. When we use a linking R, we are going to pronounce the final R sound at the end of a word if the following word begins with a vowel sound, right? And also we have that words that end in or in American English have an extra U in the British English. And we're talking here about spelling. And we have, for instance, the words color and flavor that are usually written, or are written, not usually, are written without the U in American English, but in British English they are always going to be written with that U between the O, that it's going to be placed between the O and the R. And then also sets and words that end in eyes are spelled with an S, like for example in realize and organized. In British English they are going to be pronounced with, written with S, with an S, and in American English they are going to be written with a seat. So they are going to be written with. Now we are going to move on to the American English. And I am going to ask Diego Farias. Can you speak, Diego? No? Bastian?
Okay.
Thank you very much.
American English. The United States is home to more native English speakers than any other country in the world.
Yes.
They make a great use of the letter R. American English speakers use the following measurements. Weight is not in kilograms, but in pounds. Temperature is not in Celsius, but in Fahrenheit. And distance is measured not in meters or kilometers, but in inches, feet, and miles.
Thank you very much. So yes, the United States has a population of over 300 million people, if I'm not mistaken. So they have more native English speakers than any other country in the world. And when we say that they make great use of the letter R, it means that in comparison to British English, for example, that are a non-rhotic have a non-rhotic accent. Here in American English, we have a rhotic accent. We have a R coloring accent, so they make use of their R's. And then it says something about the measurements, and this is something very important that we need to remember about American English, because if you, I don't know if this has happened to you, but for instance, if you cook if you bake something, you're not going to find in the recipe something like, oh, preheat the oven at, I don't know, 200 degrees Celsius. They are going to say the temperature in Fahrenheit, and it's different from Celsius, and it can be a little bit tricky if you don't know how to make the conversions. And the same happens with kilograms. There are no kilograms for them. They measure weight in pounds, and distance they use inches, feet, and miles. So for instance, I am 1 meter 55, but I am 5 foot 1 inch, if I'm not mistaken. So it's a little bit weird to understand. And if you speak to native people, they usually ask you things like that. Oh, how tall are you? And if you say, oh, I am 155 meters, they usually don't understand. Some of they do, but the majority of them are listening to the measurements in inches, feet, and miles, depending on what you're talking about. So now we're going to move on to Australian English, and we are going to go more in detail about this type of English, because it's not a type of English we talked about as much as we do talked about American or British English. And it says Australian English, or also known as Aussie English. And we can have Aussie English, Aussie accent, or someone can be an Aussie. So it's like the nationality. It takes features of both British and American English, so sometimes it's considered a combination of the two variations. In terms of spelling, Australian English usually it's more or resembles more British English because they retain in words like color or rice the same endings. But there are some other words, and we are going to see this later in some other examples in which they follow some American English rules. So there we have, for instance, an example that in the USA, in the word center, the final letters are and in Australia or the United Kingdom is centre. So there we have a change in the last two letters, and the same happens with the words color, and organized. And there we have something very interesting, like for instance, take a look at the word analog. In British and Australian English, they add more letters to it. So instead of just being analog, we have a U and an E at the end. And then finally we have in the word traveled, we have a double L at the end in the Australian British English. Now, in terms of grammar, there are some differences between American English, Australian English, and British English. And for instance, in the case of collective nouns and past tense are the main difference we can notice. And this is, for example, in the United States, you will say the class is happy. And also you will say that in Australia, the class is happy. But in the UK, you are not going to say is happy, but are happy. So the class are happy. Because of the collective nouns, they use a different verb there. And in the case of past tense, we have I'd forgotten in the case of the United States, but then Australia and the UK share the same one. Now it is not the United States and Australia, but Australia and the UK. And instead of saying I have forgotten in Australia and in England or in any of the British islands, it will be I'd forgot. And something very similar happens in the case of I learned it. The spelling, it's going to be the same in Australia and in the UK. Now we have another difference in when it comes to the present perfect. And there we have the example that in the USA, people will say, I ate dinner already. But in Australia and in the UK, it is more common to hear, I have eaten dinner already. So it is more common for the people in the United States, it's more common to use the past simple more often. So with that being said, now we are going to move on to some pronunciation features. And it says that Australian English lose the R sound, and if it is at the end of a word of a syllable. And this is something very similar to British English, because Australian English is also a non-rhotic variety of English. They also do not pronounce final R sounds. And the pronunciations in terms of the R sounds are very similar. And there says in US English speakers have D where British English has T in words such as pitting rather than British pitting. In Australian English, both T and D variants are commonplace. This may sound a little bit complicated, but it's very simple. And it means that it says that, for instance, in the word duty, duty is how you will pronounce this word in America, like duty with a D. But in England, you will say duty with a T. And the same happens with this word, pitting. In in America, it's pronounced with a D instead of a T, so it's pitting. And in British English, it's pitting. But here says that in Australian English, both options are possible. You can say pitting or pitting in Australian English, and the same happens with the word duty or duty. You can say both of them. So it can, in the word duty in Australian English could be duty or duty. If you have any questions, just let me know. By the way. And now we have some Australian vocabulary. And it is because, as we already mentioned, English, Australian English and British and American English share some words. For example, in the case of Australian English, they use the word petrol, and British English, they also use the word petrol, but in American English, they use the word gasoline to refer to the same element. The same happens with holiday in Australian English and British English, and vacation in American English. And the same happens with mobile phone in Australian and British English, and cell phone in American English. And anti-clockwise in American and British English, and counterclockwise in American English. And this refers to the movement of the clock when it's not doing the clockwise. It's not going in the clockwise direction. It's going in the opposite direction. But there's something interesting happens because instead of saying that football is a word for Australian English to refer to football, they use soccer, which is the American version of the word. So in Australian English, it's going to be soccer, as well as in American English, and in British English, it's going to be football. And the same happens with the case of overalls in Australia and in America, and the word dungarees in British English, and the word pants both in Australian English and American English, and in British English it's going to be trousers. Now we are going to listen to a video of some men talking about some common slang or abbreviations of of Australian words. Please tell me if you cannot listen to it. Can you listen to it?
G'day, my name's Josh. This is
Yes,
my
miss.
mate.
Yes, great. So now you are going to listen to two men talking about some words and how they pronounce those words in their Aussie English, basically.
1, 2, 3. G'day, my name's Josh. This is my mate Reese.
G'day.
Now we're from Australia. We love a good chat, but not for too long. So what us Aussies have gone and done is abbreviated everything.
Australia.
Australia.
Football.
Footy.
Tennis ball.
Tenner.
Biscuit.
Vicky.
Chocolate.
Chocky.
Chocolate biscuit.
Chocky Vicky.
McDonald's.
Maccas.
Laptop.
Lappy.
ACDC.
Akataka.
Devastated. Definitely.
Defo.
Morning tea.
Monos.
No one is ever
I say that all the time. What time is it? Monos. Get a Vicky.
Afternoon.
Arvo.
This afternoon.
Savo.
Dinner.
Din dins.
Breakfast.
Brekkie.
Service station.
Servo.
Petrol.
Petty.
Bottle shop.
Bottle-o.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Bowling club.
Bolo.
Garbage man.
Garbo.
Postman.
Posty.
RSL.
Ari. Or Rissel.
Smoke break.
Smoker.
Registration.
Rego.
Aggressive.
Aggro.
Pregnant.
Preggers.
Full and gone. Swimming costume.
Cosy.
Mosquito.
Mozzie.
Tracksuit pants.
Tracky pants.
Monday.
Monday.
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Thursday.
Thursday.
Friday.
Friday.
Saturday.
Saturday.
Sunday.
Sunday.
Birthday.
Birthday.
Musician.
User.
U-turn.
Yui.
You're from out west.
Westy.
Facebook.
Facey.
Vegetarian.
Veger.
Cab driver.
Cabby.
Lipstick.
Lippy.
Sunglasses.
Sunnies.
Present.
Prezi.
Christmas.
Chrissy.
Christmas present.
Chrissy Prezi.
St. Vincent de Paul.
Vinnies.
The Salvation Army.
Salbos.
Cup of tea.
Cuppa.
Is that British?
We are British.
Avocado.
Avo.
Have an avocado.
Have an avo.
Spaghetti bolognese.
Spag bog. Do you call it spag bog or spag bowl?
Bowl.
I think there's two variations.
Spag bog is poo. Underpants.
Undies.
Beverage.
Bevy.
Chewing gum.
Chili.
Toasted sandwich.
Toasty.
Methylated spirits.
Metho.
Turpentine.
Terps.
Fellow.
Fellow.
Poverty-stricken person.
Povo.
Husband.
Hubby.
Give me.
Give me.
Trying to.
Trying to.
Hectic.
Heckers.
Cigarette.
Siggy.
Tin can of beer.
Tinny.
Schnitzel.
Schnitty.
Ambulance.
Amber.
Fireman.
Fiery.
Cop.
Copper.
Bricklayer.
Bricky.
Tradesman.
Tradie.
Umbrella.
Brolly.
Sick day off work.
Sicky.
Kangaroo.
Roo.
Campaign.
Champers.
Relatives.
Rellos.
Expensive.
XC.
Brisbane.
Brizzy.
Derelict.
Darrow.
Cabernet Sauvignon.
Capsat.
Kindergarten.
Kindy. I did write like a little after Smoko. I might go down to the Bolo Savo for a schnitty and bevy with Tomo. Then I'll head back to the Mrs. for Dindins with the fam and watch some soapies on the telly. Hopefully the only way I don't get pulled over by the coppers because I don't have me rego. We're so bogan. Hopefully you've learned how to speak Aussie, Australian, so you can have shorter conversations. That's how to
Do you
have
wanna
Well, with this video, I hope you got an idea of how people pronounce some words in Australia. And just an interesting fact is that the word selfie, like we usually go to take portraits of ourselves, comes from Australia. And they usually make this type of abbreviations of the words. So now we are going to read some of the most common ones. And the first one is Barbie for barbecue, mushy for mushrooms, sunnies for sunglasses, prissy as instead of a present, brekkie instead of breakfast, Chrissy instead of Christmas, Bicky instead of biscuit, and Macca's instead of McDonald's. So if someone says, let's go to Macca's, it means let's go to get McDonald's. Pia? Can you speak, Pia? Can you read
Yes.
the examples from 1 to 8, please?
1 to 8?
Yes.
Barbie, Machi, Sunny's, Pricey, Breaky, Cheesy,
Chrissy?
Vicky, and Macas.
Macca's, yeah, that's right. I think the one you were struggling with was Pressy, as present, Pressy. So thank you very much. Now we have the words from 9 to 16, and those are servo instead of gas station, or pego instead of a vegetarian, defo, and that's definitely, prego instead of pregnant, rego, the registration of a vehicle, abo, it means an afternoon or in the afternoon, abo instead of avocado, and kappa instead of cup of tea. And kappa, it's also a word that the British use, by the way. So, Sebastian,
Yes.
can you read from 9 to 16, please, the words?
Okay. Servo, gas station, a gas station. Bego, a vegetarian. Defo, definitely. Prego, pregnant. Rego, registration of a vehicle. Arbo, an afternoon. Abo, ahogado. Copa, cup of tea.
Thank you very much. So I was thinking sometimes maybe it's difficult to differentiate when they are talking about abo as an afternoon or abo as an avocado because they don't pronounce the R in the middle, so it's very similar. But depending on the context, it's what they want to say. So now we have some words that have different variations depending on where the speaker is from. And for instance, for that image that it's there, British people will say biscuits as well as Australian people, but American people will say cookies. We also have this photo of those chips for British, or hot chips, or only chips for Australians, and French fries or only fries for Americans. We have an image of a pavement, of a footpath, and a sidewalk. And here the three words are different. And as we already mentioned, in the United Kingdom, the word pavement. In Australia, they will say footpath, and in the States, they will say sidewalk. And the same happens in the case of these sweets in England or in the UK, lollies in the case of Australia, and candy in the case of America. So now we are going to do the following activity. And I think we are going to listen to it and we are going to check after the break. So here you have some, and by some I mean 5 recordings, and you have to identify the dialect the speaker is using. You have some words that were that we covered this session, but also the previous sessions, in which I don't know if you remember, but for instance, you can see the word can't repeated. And I don't know if you could remember, but there's a difference between pronouncing that verb in American English and in British English. So based on that, it is how the words, I mean, it's how you're going to identify which dialect the speaker is using, and also because of you're going to be able to listen to them. So now please read the sentences, and I am going to play the recordings after 1 minute. So this is the first one.
Our local fire station burnt down last night.
And I'm going to use this as an example to repeat the instructions. So you already listened to the first recording. What you have to do now is that, according to what you have heard, you have to write down what her dialect, what her accent is, or what dialect she is using, because the first one is a woman. So, Bastian,
Yes.
can you tell me what you have to do?
After listening to each audio, we have to decide which country is the speaker who is talking.
Yeah, that's correct. The dialect can be, or the type of English can be British English, American English, or Australian English. So you have to pay close attention to that. Once again, this is the number 1.
Our local fire station burnt down last night.
I am going to play each recording 3 times. See Second time.
Our local fire station burnt down last night.
And one last time.
Our local fire station burnt down last night.
Now number 2.
A pity that I can't go to the party.
Second time.
A pity that I can't go to the party.
One last time.
A pity that I can't go to the party.
Now number 3.
I asked for 2 orders of chips. I asked for 2 orders of chips.
Second time.
I asked for 2 orders of chips. I asked for 2 orders of chips.
One last time.
I asked for 2 orders of chips. I asked for 2 orders of chips.
Number 4.
It's a pity that I can't go to the party.
Second time.
It's a pity that I can't go to the party.
And one last time.
It's a pity that I can't go to the party.
And number 5.
It's a pity that I can't go to the party.
Second time.
It's a pity that I can't go to the party.
And one last time.
It's a pity that I can't go to the party.
Now. Kelly Valdez. Kelly. Gaspar. Oh, your mic. Omar. No?
Yes, miss?
Can you help me with the first one?
Okay.
We can do this and then we're going to have the break. What was the dialect the speaker was using?
What's British? No.
Yeah, that's correct. It was British.
Oh.
It was British. Yeah. She said, our local fire station. It was like, our local fire. She was British. So you're right. Thank you very much. Diego Troncoso, can you help me with number 2?
Yes, I think, but I'm not pretty sure about my answer.
It's okay.
I am between British or Australian, but I'm not sure at all.
I don't know if you remember, but I mentioned that in British English they pronounce the T's like toot, and in Australian English sometimes they use T and D's. In this case, the speaker said, "It's a pity. It's a pity that I can't go to the party."
British.
It's British. That's correct. Thank you very much. Sebastian?
Yes.
Can you help me with number 3, please?
I think it's American English.
American English?
Yes.
What about the rest? Do you agree? Bastian?
Yes, I agree with Bastian.
You agree? I am so sorry to tell you that it was not American English.
Oh.
I trick you. Number 3.
It's so tricky.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. Number 3 was an example of Australian English. And I don't know if you remember, but the word chips in Australian English, they use chips or hot chips. And the women said like I asked for 2 orders of chips. And it is tricky because, as I already mentioned, some people consider that Australian English is a mixture between British and American, so it sounds similar. But this one was Australian English. Now for number 4. Bastian?
American.
American.
Because they are the only one to say can't instead of can. They say can't go to the party.
Yeah, that's right. So it's American. And last but not least, Pia? Number 5?
Yes. Is I think is Australian.
That's correct. It is Australian. It was Australian. She said, it's a pity that I cannot go to the, instead of like in the second example in which it was party, in this case, the can't was similar, but the word party was like party, not party, como more like party instead of party. So yeah, that was it.
It's a pity that I can't go.
Sorry. Now, before we go to our break, we're going to do a recap. And I don't know if you remember, but this was the module we saw at the beginning of the lesson. Kachiru's module of the 3 circles of English. And we also saw accents and dialects, and we talked about British English, American English, and Australian English. So now is, do you have any questions, by the way? Do you have any questions? No? Or do you? Is it clear, at least what we saw now?
Yes, miss.
Yes? Okay, that's great. So now, if there's no questions, we are going to have a 10-minute break. And it is 9:37. I am going to see you at 9:47. Is that okay?
Okay.
Great.
Yes, okay.
So I will see you after the